we're doing something. We're trying, if anything's going to happen, it's going to be because of the efforts that we're putting into us, God with us. Like that, that was what I would tell myself. And now when I hear about these causes, I still get horrified. I still get angry. I mean, any normal human emotion that you get to this. But a big part of me is like, yep, we're going to fix this one too, because we just keep winning, because we have a proven formula of helping not just these families, but anyone that's going through these types of things, which is get the facts about the case, put it out, and I think very often a lot of people that put out this type of content, they get so focused on letting people know just how terrible it is, they don't forget the part about giving them something useful to do about it. And what you're actually doing is you're spreading apathy. Because what happens is people have to then go on with the rest of their life. They can't just sit there in their anger. They have to go, oh, this is so terrible. Oh, well, what am I going to do? I guess I'll go back to my life. They just file it under you can't fight City Hall.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential.
Everyone, and welcome to the American Potential Podcast. I'm your host, David Fromm. As you're scrolling through social media or watching on TV, you've probably come across a crazy story and thought, that's not real. But for some families, those crazy stories are their reality. Some are battling eminent domain just to, hold on to their land. Others have to look at having to get a permit to use a mobile wheelchair. And then there are stories, heartbreaking stories, of parents taking their kids to get medical attention to only have their world get turned upside down. One man heard these stories and decided to do something. He started an organization not only to support the individuals facing these challenges, but also to create a simple way for others to step in and help. I want to welcome Spike Cohen, who's the founder and president of You Are the Power. Spike, welcome to our podcast. So happy to have you.
Thanks for having me on, David. I really appreciate it.
Cool. Well, hey, I know, I remember just knowing a little bit about you that you were the vice presidential candidate for a presidential election as a libertarian. What was that experience like?
So was possibly the most challenging thing I've ever done. It's certainly up there, especially since it was during the lockdowns and all the mandates and everything. So not only did I visit close to 40 states during the campaign, almost a different state every day for months on end, but I did it at one of the weirdest times to do that, at a time when sometimes we were the only people on the plane, or I'd go to certain states and do a campaign event and have to leave before 8 p.m. because otherwise they would literally cordon off the roads leaving the state, and you were stuck there for 2 weeks on quarantine. So all sorts of crazy stuff. But my takeaway during that campaign is that this movement has a lot of growing to do if we're going to get anywhere. And more importantly, I had people coming to my campaign events with issues that they were being affected by right now, often in their own backyards at their local and state level government. And the only thing I could offer them was that we were trying to grow the movement so that one day we could help them. Well, they needed our help right now. And so coming out of that campaign, it really led me to create what is now You Are the Power.
Yeah, that's great. So it was directly related. So tell me about, how you had the idea for starting You Are the Power and kind of what it's all about.
Yeah, so during the campaign, two different things happened. One was I met all these people that were putting together all these campaign events across the country. It was a fairly decentralized campaign in that we relied very heavily on local activists to put together the different events that we were coming and speaking at. And I'd meet these people and they were so excited that they were able to, fight to get us on all 50 state ballots and get all this, get all these events put together and get all these people to show up, especially during the lockdowns and everything else, which made it even more difficult. And they were excited. And they said, man, if only we could do this all the time, not every 4 years, and do it towards something that we actually had a chance of winning. And so that was kind of in the back of my head there, hearing that over and over again. But then again, I kept having these people coming out to my events and telling me about these horrific things that their local and state level governments were doing to them. You mentioned some of them, eminent domain cases. People were having their homes taken from them, especially during COVID. It was a lot of small businesses that were having their lives destroyed because they were open during COVID, which their big box competitors were never told to shut down, but they were told to shut down, and they were being threatened with literally having their lives ruined and losing everything for it. And I'd hear this stuff over and over again. And, I'm running for vice president in a race where our victories are things like ballot access and how many people we can get to join the party, we know going into it, the likelihood of us winning is essentially zero. Like there's nothing legally stopping us, but we're not going to win. We know that. And so it was very difficult to look at these people and say, well, one day I'd like to have a movement strong enough to do something for you. It just seemed like there was something that we could do. And so coming out of that campaign, I thought, what if we just told the stories? Because then, now I have a fairly decent sized platform of people following me. And I thought, well, what if I use my social media to tell the stories of these people whose lives are being upended by corrupt government officials and bad government policy? And instead of just getting people upset about something terrible, actually giving them a call to action to reach out to those specific individual officials that are doing this thing to them, give them a feasible thing to tell them to do, usually just stop doing whatever this terrible thing is, and see if that worked. And so throughout 2021, as sort of a proof of concept, we picked a few test causes to see if we could actually accomplish this. We had a roughly 70% success rate with a budget of nothing and, just essentially a few dozen volunteers helping us. And based on that, we launched You Are the Power in 2022. And since then, we have had a nearly 100% success rate.
Wow. So how do you get people involved? And if someone comes to help you, like, what do they do, like practically, to try to make a difference?
Well, the first thing, if someone comes to me needing help, the first thing they can do is go to youarethepower.net/help and give us all their information about what's happening to them. And my team will follow up with them, get all the information we need. We have a very thorough vetting process because we want to make sure the causes we're taking off on are true and legit. We have all the information we need. We want to make sure that it's something we can actually build a movement around. And we also want to make sure that what we're calling for is something feasible, something that we can actually get done in a reasonable amount of time. And then once we've done that, we put it out to our social media, and we put out content that very often becomes viral and often gets millions of views. And then from that, we direct people to go to a page on our website that has all the particulars about that specific cause. But most importantly, it has a very easy way to reach out to those officials that are doing whatever the harm is in whatever case of that cause by basically just clicking where it has either their name, or if it's many officials that need to be targeted, we have a thing that just says, click here to email the officials. It has all of their emails already in the to line. It has the subject in there. It has all the wording in the body. Really, all you have to do is add your name at the end. You can edit it or put your own wording in if you want to, but if you want, you can just add your name at the end and press send. So in less time than it took me to just explain that, you can reach out to all these officials. And what we found is sometimes it's been tens of thousands of people have reached out to these officials. Sometimes it's been a few dozen people that have reached out to these officials, but these officials aren't used to getting that kind of heat. They aren't used to getting tons of emails in their inbox. They're not used to going on social media and being famous suddenly for all the wrong reasons. Just about every time they back off. Not immediately, but usually they either back off. Sometimes they actually realize what they did was wrong and they join us in fixing it. But usually, more often than not, if only for political expediency, they back off and do the right thing.
So public pressure and political pressure, grassroots pressure is the lever that you're using to make change, if I'm understanding it right. It also seems like one thing I always found is that when there's a light shown on government and there's some transparency provided, that really does change how a lot of elected officials or unelected folks, your bureaucrats, kind of behave. And so that's kind of what You Are the Power is really leveraging here. Is that right?
We're doing two things. Yes, we're using public pressure. And yes, it is true that the best, disinfectant is sunlight. And a lot of this stuff is happening just because they can get away with it. You'll hear of these city councils doing these brazenly horrific things during their council meetings because they still have to actually go through the rigmarole of doing it, but no one's there to watch it. So, they're sitting there, they're drinking coffee to barely stay awake, and they do whatever their unanimous votes are, or maybe there's one person dissenting from it, and they're destroying people's lives in the process. Maybe the people whose lives they're destroying show up and say, hey, please stop doing this, and they just ignore them and go through it. But it's not, the public isn't seeing it. But I think there's this other thing that's happening that we're helping to expose. I think very often these officials, especially since no one is giving them any feedback, they start to fall into their own lies of thinking that this is just part of the process, or they're just doing their jobs and, they got to break some eggs to make omelets or whatever they have to tell themselves to do it. They kind of set their humanity aside when it comes to these things. They go home, they kiss their kids on their foreheads. They worry about their kids' future. They worry about their neighborhoods and communities. They may even very much worry about whatever it is, the issue that they're working on. But when it comes to this specific thing, stealing someone's home with eminent domain, or charging someone with things that they know that they didn't do, fighting to keep body cam footage from being released to protect officials that did harm, tearing children from families, whatever the thing is, they kind of just put that aside. Like, well, this is just part of my job. And we're reminding them, this isn't part of any job. And if it is, you should quit. But this isn't your job. Your job is to be a human and to use your agency to do the right thing. That's always what your job is. And I think very often we've had people resign because they were just too corrupt to do the right thing. More often than not, they do it for political expediency. But we've had legitimate cases where the people, I think, genuinely realized, wow, this isn't just whatever I've told myself it is. It is a terrible thing. And they have not only backed off and done the right thing, but they've often joined us in making it so this never happens again.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good people still who get into public service for the right reasons. Yep. And then over time, you're ground down or you become hardened. You see a lot of terrible stuff if you're in the kids section, for instance, or whatever it is, or you just tell yourself, hey, well, this is what we do. But I think there's just such a disconnect between them dealing with another case, signing that piece of paper, pushing it over there, getting to it when they can get to it, return that voicemail when they get to it. And that same situation is the biggest life-altering thing going on in that family's life.
Yeah.
I mean, that inequity is always so frustrating, when you interact with the bureaucracy or government in some way. And it's always struck me that it's like, if you could just get this person to care about this the way that we care about it, we really could have a real dialogue here and come to a reasonable solution. But you never really feel like you're getting that.
No, because I think two things happen. One is either people just look at it as some leviathan that they can do nothing about, and so they just kind of keep their heads down and they look away from it. Or the second thing is they go at it as though these are their adversaries and they must destroy them. And we see what happens, right? Even if you win, you've now come in with the same energy that you just sought to replace, and you often become worse than the monster that you got rid of. What we're trying to do is bring it back to a human level of saying it should have never been this way. I'll give you an example of this. So there is a family, the Hernandez family, Matt and Tucky Hernandez, and they have two children, two little girls, Emma and Aria. Now, when Emma was a baby, just a few months from being born, she started suddenly having swelling in her legs, and she was just getting increasingly fussy. So like any loving parents, they took her to the hospital. And at the hospital, this was in Georgia, so they took her to Children's Hospital of Atlanta. And so at the hospital, they did x-rays on her, and they did a bunch of blood work. The x-rays showed that she had multiple fractures throughout her legs at various stages of healing. The blood work, when it came back, indicated that this was being caused by chronic health issues due to very depleted vitamin D levels and a host of other things that pointed to this, and a lack of any evidence of any trauma. So this wasn't being caused by any kind of physical, there wasn't any abuse, there wasn't any kind of accident. This was being caused because her body was actually causing this to happen. It was a health issue. And for some reason, both of their children were taken from them. They were accused of abuse. And as a condition, they were arrested for felony abuse. And as a condition of their bond, they weren't allowed to talk to each other or be within however many feet of each other. So overnight, with not only no evidence of abuse, but full evidence of no abuse and evidence of an actual medical problem, they not only lost their children, but they lost each other. They lost everything overnight as a result of that. And so they spent tens of thousands of dollars to fight to get their kids' medical records, because the state said, hey, these aren't your kids anymore. You don't have custody, so you can't get their medical records. That's not, we say innocent until proven guilty. That's not even guilty until proven innocent. That's guilty and not allowed to prove that you are innocent. So they fight, they spend thousands to get their kids' medical records. They finally get the medical records, and sure enough, it's all right there. The kids have a chronic health condition. They take those records to medical experts, actual medical experts, who look at it and say, yep, no sign of abuse. Emma has either osteogenesis imperfecta or neonatal rickets or something in one of those families of illnesses. And they said, well, thank God, now we can get our kids back. This was all a big misunderstanding. We can get her the treatment that she needs. They go to family court. The judge refuses to allow any of that medical evidence to be entered into testimony, does not allow any of the medical experts to testify. She instead takes just the so-called child abuse pediatrician who diagnosed her with abuse. He did not, when he showed up to court, he had no paperwork. He didn't seem to be familiar with the case. And his evidence was, he said, well, yeah, when you look at these types of injuries, statistically, they tend to be caused by abuse. And when he was asked to cite the source of that statistic, he said, oh, you can look it up on the internet. Based on that stellar testimony, the judge ordered non-reunification, which means that now not only Emma and Aria are already in foster care at this point, but now Matt and Tucky face the prospects of never seeing them again and of them being placed permanently for adoption. They're also facing pending criminal charges where they could face up to 40 years in prison each for their crimes. That's when we find out about it, thanks to one of the foster families reaching out to us and saying, something's wrong here. These kids weren't abused. And DFACS, when we told them that, they responded by firing us and saying they didn't want our services anymore. So we find out about this. And I'm telling this story to tell quite a few stories. And the first is just the outrage and the inhumanity behind this, because all of the people involved, again, they were going home, kissing their kids on the forehead, going to church, going to synagogue, going to community service stuff, whatever they do, considering themselves good people. And yet they're doing this horrific thing because it's part of their job. And so we go and we find out about this. We vet it heavily, spent over 100 hours vetting it. We did not want to inadvertently help an abusive or neglectful family at all. Found out it was just as bad as they had said. It was even worse than they remembered it. We put the content out there. Millions of people saw it. Thousands of people contacted the CPS worker, the CPS supervisor, Child Protective Services. That's what CPS means. The family court judge, the DA, everyone involved. And so that was the first thing that happened. The second thing that happened was all of those officials just suddenly capitulated. The family court judge suddenly saw no evidence of abuse and no need to continue this any further. The CPS, it's called DFACS, Division of Family and Children's Services. The DFACS workers said the same, and they closed out their case. And Emma and Aria were now allowed to go and visit their parents and live with family. They couldn't go back permanently to their home until the criminal case was adjudicated, but at least they were out of the foster care system. Reunification had been ordered. Their family court case had been closed out. That nightmare was at least behind them. The next thing that happened was families with the exact same story came out of the woodwork from all over the country. Same exact story. My kid had Ehlers-Danlos, metabolic bone disorder, complications from birth, osteogenesis imperfecta, some health issue that fully explained their injuries, but our kids were taken from us. We've been legally railroaded. Everyone knows that nothing wrong happened to them. Some of them have even been charged criminally. Their families have been torn apart. And that's when we found out why. Under Title 4E of the Social Security Act, the federal government pays state CPS agencies based on the number of abuse cases they had the previous year. In other words, they're paying them every time they accuse someone of abuse. And so what we're seeing happen is that the CPS agencies are just looking for the easiest way to accuse as many people of abuse as possible. And that means camping out in front of children's hospitals and waiting for people that show up with medically explainable injuries and parents who aren't doing anything to hide anything because they don't have anything to hide. And they railroad them over and over and over again. And all they have to do is just destroy a bunch of families in the process, and they get all sorts of funding. So we put that out there. We now put all these other families out there. Now we're talking with other people who've been operating in this space for decades. And they said, we've only ever lost. Like we've every once in a while, we'll get a family reunited or we'll get charges dropped or something. But 99 times out of 100, we lose. Every single family we put out, we've reunited. It happens over and over and over again in Georgia, in Arizona, in states across the union. We're having this happen multiple times over and over and again. And then we reach a critical mass in Georgia, which is where it all started, where after some of our content goes out and an investigative journalist named Rebecca Lindstrom makes a documentary about the work that we're doing, the head of DFACS, Candace Brose, reaches out to us personally and privately and says, I had no idea it was this bad. How do we fix this? Now, this isn't political expediency. She's not putting out press reports. She's not, acting magnanimous in front of cameras. She's saying nothing publicly and taking all sorts of heat and reaching out to us privately and saying, what do we do to fix this? So we give her a list of things that have to be implemented immediately. The biggest things are parents that are accused of abuse need to be able to get their kids' medical records and get a second opinion from a licensed, accredited medical doctor that's outside of that getting funded by the federal government system. to try to prove that they're innocent, just like any one of us would want to do. And the other thing that needs to happen is the doctors accusing them have to actually attest that they reviewed the kids' medical records before just stamping abuse on their file. And there are a few other changes as well. She implemented those policies immediately, like without any hesitation. She did it immediately. Again, privately behind the scenes, we're the ones who came public with it saying that she did it. And then we went to Capitol Hill and said, this needs to be codified into law. And when she was asked about it, because it's her agency, she said, this is what we're already doing. It needs to be codified into law. Previously, when we spoke with lawmakers, they'd tell us, we're not really interested in that. We actually had one lawmaker tell us, I'd rather see innocent parents lose their kids than guilty parents not lose their kids. That was the response we were getting on Capitol Hill. With this change that happened, they ended up naming this rule Ridge's Law after Ridge Collins, who was taken from his parents for 3 years after he was wrongfully diagnosed with abuse. We helped to get them reunited as well. It was named Ridge's Law. It was passed unanimously in both chambers of the state legislature in Georgia, and it was signed into law back in May by Governor Kemp, surrounded by Ridge Collins and his family and many of the other families we've helped to reunite. That all came from two things. One, a family that was being actually three things: a family that was being torn apart, another family that was willing to say, hey, we have to do something about this, the one that reached out to us, and an official who realized that she was in the wrong and that she wanted to join us in doing the right thing. And on the strength of that, we have lawmakers reaching out to us from states across the union saying, how do we fix this in our state? And we're building the critical mass eventually to be able to make the federal fix to either get rid of Title IV-E entirely or at least tie the funding to something neutral, like the population of the state or something like that, so that there's no longer this subsidization of a specific outcome. That happened because there were most officials backed off for political expediency. They didn't want the heat. But at least one official said, nope, this is wrong and we need to fix it. And I think that's a key part of what You Are the Power does. We're bringing public pressure, but we're also we're reminding them, you're a human being with agency. You know what the right thing is here. Now let's join us in doing the right thing.
Well, it sounds like something we say at Americans for Prosperity all the time is we try to aggregate and elevate grassroots voices so that it's easier where we can help elected officials do the right thing.
Yep.
And it sounds like, that's what you're doing. You're the official in Georgia who reaches out and wants to do the right thing. I think that, trying to bring that forward is huge. This is an issue that's really just heartbreaking to me. I have a lot of kids. I have 11 kids, and I told you we're into building authentic grassroots communities.
Yes. Lead by example, yeah.
Yeah. But we had an accident at one point. We're at at a kind of a farm area, some family owned accident. Like 2-year-old gets injured by a car, or we think. And so we're like, oh my gosh, this is serious, get him to the hospital, emergency room. And he's helicoptered somewhere. It turns out, even though we thought it could be fatal, it turned out he had, through the grace of God, a few some cracks on his pelvis, and that was it.
Okay, thank God.
And it was just an amazing miracle. But the flip side of that is that there was a nurse there who thought my wife wasn't hysterical enough at the time and reported us. And so I live in Illinois, outside of Chicago, and we got wrapped up in the DCFS system. And it took me thousands of dollars, hiring an attorney, and eventually going to like administrative hearings and potentially, like if I was a teacher, I would have lost my job. If I had a child care center, I would have lost my job. Now, that's a lot better than losing my kids, which is I can't even believe that. Yep. And I know it happens all the time. But, and just to watch the bureaucracy churn through and like the lack of attention and really caring, the best thing that happened is that my administrative hearing got bopped up to the director of the agency, and they looked at it. My attorney said it was only the second time we ever saw it in like 30 years. And the director said, no, this actually doesn't have merit. He's fine. And then, threw out the case. Yeah. But that in my life was such a giant deal. Than to watch the people just processing it and kind of adjudicating it. It just was, it was one of a dozen, hundreds things that they had going on, and it just didn't matter. And at the same time, it exposed my family to this entity that I didn't think had a lot of credibility and didn't think they were very good at jobs, just to be honest with you, from what I observed.
Yeah.
You know, they could then come in and, you know, oh, I don't have, you know, that door's not secured right. Or, oh, I don't think, you know, the kids don't have their shoes on. Or, you know, we got 11 kids and they're homeschooled and, you know, we're doing all kinds of stuff. And my kids are super healthy, super well adjusted, really great kids, well fed, all the things that you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
But they don't look like your normal suburban family all the time. And, you know, these folks, they'd be like, they had questions about everything. And man, I felt like it was just a ticking time bomb that in a matter of time, they'd really jam us up. And you just don't want to be in the system. It's so bad. And so folks that have it way worse, having, you know, these medical conditions where kids present as being abused and not being able to prove that is just heartbreaking. I mean, you're already heartbroken that your kid has this condition.
Yeah.
And that you're trying to deal with it. And then, you know, pile on 10 times with, you know, taking them away and the, you know, criminal charge. Oh, it's heartbreaking. I'm so glad, man. I hope you get up every day and are like, yes, I'm going to keep doing this great stuff.
You know, what's incredible about that, when I first heard about these causes and about any of the causes we take on, but especially these ones, I would get this pit in my stomach. This like feeling of terror and this like, man, I hope we can do something about this. And the piece I would give myself is we're doing something. We're trying, if anything's going to happen, it's going to be because of the efforts that we're putting into us, God with us. Like that, that was what I would tell myself. And now when I hear about these causes, I still get horrified. I still get angry. I mean, any normal human emotion that you get to this, but a big part of me is like, yep, we're going to fix this one too, because we just keep winning, because we have a proven formula of helping not just these families, but anyone that's going through these types of things, which is get the facts about the case, put it out, you know, and I think very often a lot of people that put out this type of content, they get so focused on letting people know just how terrible it is, they don't forget the part about giving them something useful to do about it. And what you're actually doing is you're spreading apathy. Because what happens is people have to then go on with the rest of their life. They can't just sit there in their anger. They have to go, oh, this is so terrible. Oh, well, what am I going to do? I guess I'll go back to my life, you know, and they just file it under you can't fight City Hall. And then they go back to looking at cat videos so that they can get through their life. Like they have to cope with their life and get through life. So what we do is we get them angry enough. So we go, and here's how you can help us. Oh, and here are all the other families we've helped too. So this is actually very useful. And you've got a very high likelihood of helping us if you can help us. And what we found is that when we can do that, we've now created this situation where after hearing other people that have been fighting on this for decades, getting absolutely nowhere, we just recently in Colorado and Indiana, we had two families that reached out to us. We privately reached out to the officials involved, and they completely backed off. Probably because they looked at our record and didn't want any part of it. So those are two families that won't have this nightmare that they're being put through entirely because we just emailed some people and said, "Hey, back off." And that is on the strength of the work of literally thousands of people that help us on these causes. A dedicated team of well over 100 volunteers that are essentially working at this as their full and part-time jobs. And that's what we do. And you know firsthand from what you went through with your son, who at the time was a toddler, right? You said he was 2?
Right. Yeah.
You saw firsthand what this can look like. Because even though, thank God, the worst didn't happen to you, you got glimpses of it. You could have never seen your kid again, God forbid. You could have gone to prison for abuse that you could prove didn't happen, but no one would actually look at your case. No one would actually look at it. In the case of the Hernandez family, the criminal court judge actually colluded with the DA to not allow any of that evidence to be shown. The jury was not allowed to be shown any of the medical expert testimony or records. They weren't allowed to. You ever heard of this one? The prosecutor said that there was no need for the jury to hear from the arresting officer. Do you know why? Because the arresting officer never thought they did anything wrong. The jury was never allowed to hear that defects had completely closed their case out due to lack of evidence. They weren't allowed to hear that the family court judge had ordered reunification due to lack of evidence of abuse. They weren't even allowed to hear that Emma and Aria loved their parents. All they were allowed to see and hear was the x-rays showing fractures and the opinion of that so-called child abuse pediatrician, which, by the way, that is not a specialization. That's just a doctor at the a doctor at the children's hospital who's taught how to fill out the forms. That's what a child abuse. That's why I say so-called. It's not a real specialty of any real way. But the opinion of that one doctor that, well, yeah, statistically this is probably abuse. Thankfully, they saw through that and saw that the fix was in, and they voted not guilty on all 4 counts. We've actually been 4 for 4 in criminal trials. But if a jury was swayed by a judge that wanted to railroad a family, you could have, God forbid, in your situation, gone to prison for years, decades. And all of this because of a perverse funding mechanism from a rule that was probably a side thought that was put into law decades ago, Title 4E. All of that has led, I say perverse incentives lead to perverse structures, which create perverse outcomes. And that's what we're seeing. And what we figured out is that even in the meantime, until we can fix those perverse structures are still being operated by people. And you can reach out to those people and say, hey, don't do this. You know that you shouldn't do this. You know that they didn't do anything wrong. You know that they shouldn't have their children taken from them, their home taken from them, being put in prison for things that you know they didn't do. Whatever the cause is we're taking on, you know that this shouldn't be happening to them. You had the agency to fix this right now. We're not going to back off until you do. We'd love to thank you publicly for doing it, so please do that. And nearly 100% of the time they do that.
Oh, I'm so glad that you guys are filling this space. I really, really am. I think it's fabulous. So if people want to keep up with You Are the Power, what's the best way for them to do that?
Go to youarethepower.net. All roads lead to youarethepower.net. If you want to follow us, all the links to our social media are on there, so you can go to youarethepower.net. If you want to get involved with being a part of You Are the Power, then go to youarethepower.net and press the big shiny join us button at the top of the homepage and become a member today. You'll be at the tip of the spear of all of these things. You'll find out before the general public does about all of our causes, and you can be among the first to get involved and even volunteer with us. If you'd like to donate, if you have more money than time, then you can go to youarethepower.net/donate and give what you can. Our causes, on average, our non-family reunification causes cost about $5,000 from soup to nuts to complete, which is a bargain when you think about, keeping people in their homes, getting charges dropped and everything else. But $5,000 is $5,000. For our family reunification causes, because they're so much more heavily involved, they require so much more vetting. They require medical experts that help us and legal experts, and sometimes fighting in criminal court. They cost about $25,000 per cause. Again, an absolute bargain when you consider what we're actually fighting against. But $25,000 is still $25,000. So if you're in a position to give, you can go to youarethepower.net/donate. And again, if you need help, if your life is being upended, or someone that you know, or even someone that you've heard of is having their life upended by out of control, corrupt government officials and bad government policy, go to youarethepower.net/help and fill out our form. And if there is anything we can do to help, we will.
Spike, thanks so much for the work you guys are doing at You Are the Power. I think it's fabulous. I hope this just keeps growing, and that you're just keeping more and more families together, saving folks from apathy and the bureaucracy and all the things that victimize them. So thanks so much for what you're doing.
Thank you. God willing, that's the plan. Thank you for having me on, David. God bless.
Thanks. Well, hey, folks, if you like this episode and would like to stay connected with the podcast, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, as well as following us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And always remember, liberty and freedom are easily taken for granted. Don't take it for granted. Go out there and defend freedom and liberty. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.